And so I really, want to thank you for joining us today to talk about restructuring addiction services funding. And this is a really important initiative that we're going to be undertaking. It's a long-term initiative, but I think it's one that's been, sort of due for a long time. And I know it's been discussed for a long time, but we're finally here and moving forward. Um, so, I want to say that we realize how important this is. And we also want to make sure that this is really a transparent process. So we're kicking this off with a town hall so that you know exactly what's happening. And Debbie Davis is going to walk you through some of the materials on our website so that you can make sure that you're, it, you know, keeping track of the process and also being part of the process. And so it's, in addition to transparency, we really want to make sure that we hear your voices, your thoughts and your perspectives about how we're going to be restructuring our funding. So we don't have any answers yet. Again, this is a process that is going to be comprehensive and is going to include your voices. And so we really look forward to this whole initiative, and we're very excited about this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Debbie Davis, our Associate Commissioner of Fiscal Administration. Debbie.
Thank you, Chinazo, and good morning, everyone. It's a little rainy, dreary day, but we're trying to breathe some excitement and energy into the day and share with you some new information. Next slide, please. So as Chinazo said, just a little housekeeping before we get started with the topic. The presentation is going to be recorded. Your lines are muted right now, so please, put questions in the chat function or in the Q&A panel. And either way, we'll be reading those questions at the end. But any unanswered questions from the town hall will be addressed through not so much a follow-up email, but we are going to do a Q&A document that will provide answers to everything. And we'll send out an announcement, a provider announcement that Q&A document is available for viewing. So next slide, please. So as Chinazo introduced, this is the Restructure Addiction Services Funding Project that I'm going to speak to you about today. Next slide, please. So just to give you sort of the flow of how, my presentation will go, and then hopefully, we'll just spend some time, talking and addressing some questions. But we'll do an overview of net deficit financing. We'll also talk about how we're engaging a consultant and the project timeline. We will also discuss, the community input process. And and last, we'll close the presentation with showing you our webpage and what the mailbox is for sending in questions. Next slide, please. So just a general, overview of net deficit financing, as it relates to OASAS. So OASAS oversees more than, 1,700 programs and funds, 1,200 of those programs. There are over 350 funded providers and local government units, or LGUs. In the fiscal year of 2021 to 2022, nearly $500 million in state aid was provided to eligible voluntary providers and LGUs for addiction services. Next slide, please. So what does that look like from a funding perspective? We are, we can always say that obviously there's never enough funding and there's always, things to be addressed, and that's what we're here for. But, we are proud that the top 6 states in the nation that are providing state funding for, SUD services, New York is #1. So when you compare are, and this again is for the 21-22 budget. When you compare our substance use block grant allocation to the state spending, and compare that to other states, well, we are the top. So, we get anywhere from, around $110 million in the block grant. Sometimes it's a little more, as it is in the 21-22 amount. Sometimes it's a little less, but our state spending in that fiscal year was close to 500 million. And you take a look at California, that has, quite double amount of block grant federal money, but they didn't spend the same amount in their state spending for SUD services, about $61 million less. And then Ohio, significantly less block grant and significantly less state funding, $135 million less than New York, and so forth, right? And so if you continued on a comparison chart, you will eventually see, here we have Massachusetts in the, rounding the bottom half of the top six at nearly 41 million in their block grant allocation. What you'll see is it drastically starts to drop, and eventually you've got states receiving a block grant in the 20 million, 22 million, which actually equates to what our 20% set aside amount is for primary prevention in the block grant. So, I mean, New York is by and large providing the largest amount of money to the field. So next slide, please. Before I go into, more information of just giving an overview of net deficit financing, we thought we would ask you, just in general, not just, how do you calculate net deficit financing, but what does it mean to you as a provider? What is net deficit financing to you? You can include, how it's calculated, but you can also say, what does it mean to you, to your business? So please type us some answers in the chat. I feel like we should have the Jeopardy music on. Do, 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 do. I know if everyone wasn't muted, we would hear laughter. No. So Jen Farrell, thank you very much from our communications team. She has suggested place your answers here in the chat box. So I don't know if any of our providers are going to participate, and let me know, what does net deficit financing mean to you? I'll give it another couple minutes. No one has anything to share of what net deficit financing means to you. So I guess this was not a good icebreaker question. So it may have meant, that it's a lifeline. It may have meant it helps subsidize your business. It may have meant to you it's not enough. It may have meant the formula. It may have meant many other things. So without further ado, let's share with you what we think it means. Next slide, please. So simply put, right, net deficit financing is the total approved operating expenses minus all sources of revenue, gets you to what could be a shortfall, but it would be net deficit financing. I just got an email, so I just want to make sure people can see it. So someone participating sent me an email, and I just want to make sure. It says chat function is not working for folks. Well, thank you, because you're just making me feel so much better that that wasn't just. So for some reason, our WebEx is not allowing people to provide their feedback in the chat. So thanks for letting me know. It says chat function was enabled. I don't know if that means you can now place it in there, but we'll just continue forward, and thank you for letting me know. Okay, so it's total approved operating expenses and minus all sources of revenue. And that's net deficit financing. And OASAS may fund up to 100% of that total net deficit. And just to think about, what does that look like? I mean, I was trying to relate it to something that we all can relate to, right? So I'm going to use really simple numbers that are probably way lower than what's realistic, but hopefully it helps facilitate sort of that thinking and discussion, which is, let's say your home budget relies on a couple of things, right? First, your paycheck. So in this scenario that I'm going to describe, you receive $2,000 a month as a paycheck, take home pay. But your rent is $1,000 a month. And then for your utilities, as well as your food and living expenses is, $500 a month. I know that's really unrealistic, but let's go with it for the example. So in this example, on a monthly basis, your expenses are $1,500. You receive a $2,000 a month paycheck. So you actually have excess $500 that you didn't spend. So if we had, in the net deficit world, if OASAS had, in the budgeting process said, we're going to give this provider $2,000 a month, but at the end of that month, you have, haven't spent all $2,000, you've, left 500 on the table. And in that deficit world, we would take that back, right? So let's use another example where still $2,000 a month in a paycheck, but your rent is $1,000, the utilities are $500, and you're going on vacation, and that's going to cost $800. So now your expenses are $2,300, right? But in this lovely example, you magically won the lottery and won $500. So now your expenses have been reduced to $1,800. So in that world, right, I'm saying all your expenses minus all your revenues, which would be your paycheck and your lottery win, you would come up with $1,800 of expenses for that month. And in net deficit, if we had sent you 2,000, we would still take back 200. So that's how the net deficit works. And like I said, OASAS may fund up to 100% of any shortfalls, and state aid, which is OASAS's general fund, as well as the federal substance use block grant and or special revenues. And the state aid gets advanced either quarterly, which is the non-federal portion, or monthly, which is the federal block grant. So next slide, please. So net deficit, financing has some advantages. Its goal is to support uncompensated or underfunded care, right? Sometimes it subsidizes costs that are not adequately reimbursed. If you have a reimbursement stream, let's say Medicaid, and so that net deficit can help offset, shortfalls between your expenses and the revenue received. It provides funding for services not traditionally able to generate like insurance revenues, such as recovery and harm reduction and prevention. Also, a really good benefit that OASAS provides is that we are advancing state aid funding to assist with providers' cash flow issues. This is not this is not what I want to say, a common practice across the nation. There are very, very few, like we only are aware of one other state that is advancing funds like this, including the federal substance use block grant. So this is a real advantage that New York State is providing, that OASAS is providing. Next slide, please. So what are some of the challenges of net deficit financing? Historical budgets, right? And you all know this better than I do, right? Historical budgets do not provide an equitable or consistent reimbursement for the same services, right? Because, you know, they were set up historically, and, you know, there's now, you could have an older program that was a bedded program set up one way with one set of budget costs, and now a new program for the same type of service, even in the same geography, may not receive, you know, may receive a different budget. And so that's where you've got some inequities. And there's no fiscal incentive for administrative or program efficiencies. That's not to say that providers aren't finding them, but it's just saying that, you know, it's not a useful way of being able to be efficient, because as soon as you generate a revenue, we would potentially take back state aid. It's also inconsistent funding amounts from year to year. Next slide, please. As was stated earlier by our commissioner, and I believe stated in, you know, stated in our reviews of the executive budget and enacted budget, we shared that we would be taking on this project to take a look at what would be some new approaches that could solve some of the obstacles for net deficit financing. And we recognized that within OASAS, we are experts, absolutely experts on understanding our funding streams within the OASAS budget, understanding how to utilize and maximize the federal substance use block grant by providing the funding through net deficit financing. You know, that we're just great at doing this work, but we don't know what we don't know. And we wanted to recognize that we're not the experts at coming up with new approaches. We don't have years of experience in developing different funding models. So we wanted to seek out an expert, you know, a consultant that could help us develop alternate funding approaches that would ultimately provide greater equity in funding addiction services, but also maintain compliance with state and federal statutes and rules. Next slide, please. And so this led us to selecting, after going through a request for information process, you know, interviewing applicants, negotiating, you know, budget, negotiating the budget and the contract language, and then landing on a contract with Third Horizon Strategies. So as you can see, the goal is to develop a modern and equitable financial model for addiction services in New York State. The facilitator is our consultant, the Third Horizon Strategies. They are an objective and experienced organization. And we wanted an organization too that came at this with no preconceived notion of like what the solution would be. We needed somebody to come with a new, fresh set of eyes and with experience, and we found them. And they will research and develop an updated and equitable funding approach. And the process going left to right with our circles is that Third Horizon Strategies will conduct surveys to collect data, and we will be providing at least quarterly updates, and monthly focus groups will enable stakeholder feedback and involvement in this process. Resources. So as of today, this website is live. So the website is you know, oasas.ny.gov/RASFP. So it's Restructure Addiction Services Financing Project. We were trying to come up with a way to say that acronym, RASFP, RASFP. But that's going to be the website, and it will house all updates, presentations, and information. As Chinazo also said, you know, we want to be as transparent about this process, where we are in the process, what, you know, what are we analyzing in this process, where are we in the phase and the different cycles of the process. And so that's where all this information will be housed on the website. And there's also a shared mailbox that is set up and available for comments and questions. The timeline for this research and development of financing model will be conducted over a 5-year period in a phased approach. And the product will be that we will land on different approach and implement and monitor through implementation to get to a modernized and equitable financial model that addresses the priorities of the agency and yields improved delivery of service. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Can people hear me? Oh, there we go. I know we're probably having a delay with WebEx. There's something going on. I've had issues on my own computer all day, so bear with us. As the slide is, eventually will appear, let's talk about the consultant engagement. So as I stated from the slide that was on before, we're one ahead of the slide. We need to go back one. So the project planning is for a 5-year scope of work, and eventually this will show on the screen. And there are 3 primary repeating cycles of restructuring financing activities. Each cycle will provide a detailed service level process. So each cycle will include engaging stakeholders to collaboratively design the alternative financing approach for each service, a phase in of the new approach over time, and then actively provide implementation support throughout the overlapping cycles of work. So then we would go to next slide, which if we can bring it up, it will be slide 15. Okay, here we go. So determining the best approach for grouping services that would be in each cycle that I was describing. There's going to be a review of the entire system. We're going to seek key dependencies and interrelationships between service types related to their financing mechanisms, looking for similarities and differences of each service. Is it clinical? Is it non-clinical? Is it community facing? Does it generate revenue? All sorts of different data pieces related to the financing and how the program works. We will look for fiscal vulnerabilities and complexity within a service array, and then identify potential similarities in future financing approaches, but also understanding that as we group services together for the cycles, that, as we look at the different potential financing approaches, or as the consultant does and presents them, there won't be a one size fits all. Even though services could be grouped together for that cycle, the consultant has acknowledged that they may be offering different financing models for each service within that cycle. Next slide, please. So this is an example of, a timeline for, in this case, it's for cycle 1, but similar timelines will be established for cycle 2 and 3. But what you're looking at is, basically right now, we're just finishing up October and entering into November, right? So a lot of work has started with the collection of utilization. This is the research part, right? So we're going from left to right here. And, we're looking at specific research, utilization data, financial data, Medicaid warehouse data, contracting data, CFR data, which is the consolidated fiscal reporting. I believe all but I'll just state what that was about. And then we'll go into collaboration with the stakeholders. So we're about to enter that piece, which is why we're so excited to say, here we are, here we are. So there's going to be a provider-wide survey launched this month. You will receive it from Third Horizon Strategies. We will send out an all provider announcement so that you're aware and are on the lookout for this survey. We are really hopeful that there will be, a great deal of stakeholder participation, and then there'll be provider convenings. Also, we will be engaging with our state other state agencies where there's an impact related to the financing mechanism. And then we will move into review of current system of financing and reimbursements, taking a look at analyzing all the data and looking at regulatory, financial, and other practices that challenge a way to rectify and develop another approach to net deficit financing. And then we'll move into a new system of financing and reimbursement approaches, what will be the implementation process, and then we will move, into implementation, step-by-step process and outcomes evaluation, and then post-implementation, conducting internal and external reviews and presentations of findings. While we are entering into the implementation phase, we will be beginning, another cycle. So there will be some overlap with this cycle. Next slide, please. So this is the beginning right here of the community input, right? The Third Horizon Strategy Survey will be going out to the field this month, but we will also be having continuous information exchange with status updates with the stakeholders. There will be recorded community forums just like this that will be posted. There'll be stakeholder meeting minutes. There'll be commonly asked Q&As posted to the webpage. We'll have a question and answer document that will be, started. It will be located in one spot on the webpage, and it'll get updated, and it'll show the date of each time it gets updated with new questions and answers. And we have a mailbox where you can submit, questions. Next slide, please. So this is a little preview of what the web page looks like. And as you can see, it comes up with the title page, Restructure Addiction Services Financing Project. And on the left is like a table of content. So overview is, basically what we shared as our overview this morning of what are the advantages and challenges for net deficit financing and why we wanted to engage a consultant. The next, if you were to be on the webpage and select, you could go to the request for information. That is the actual published RFI. And then you also can see that infographic that was one of the slides that shows you what's the goal and all those circles going around of what we're looking to do with this whole entire project. And then if you click on Third Horizon Strategies, you would be able to see that it's a link to Third Horizon Strategies organizations page, and it gives a blurb of it gives a blurb of our engagement with them. And then you can click on the project timeline, and you will essentially see the cycle depiction that I had shared in the slides. And then for community input, this is where we're going to house the presentation. So you will see the presentation from today there. And then the contact information, which is our mailbox. So next slide, please. So we are at the question part.
Great. Thank you so much, Debbie. And the chat now works. Thank you. Earlier. So I do see some questions. So the first is about the slides being available, and as Debbie mentioned, slides will be available on our website. All of the materials are going to be it's done here. We'll have the recorded presentation slides there on the website. So Debbie, one of the questions was about the differences in the cycles. So what are those differences going to be?
So the cycles right now, again, this is on the beginning, so it potentially could be dynamic depending on that first cycle and things that we learn, but we are looking at, and I don't know if you can go back to that slide. Let me see. Right here, yeah, thank you. So we believe that the cycles will be similar. I mean, that the anticipation is that the flow, the way that the process will work will be the same for cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, that we're going to go right from looking at the services that are in that cycles, all their financial data, everything that makes up their financial mechanism, engaging with the stakeholders, continuing with that review of, individually, how providers' finances are working, what is really in the CFR, really breaking down the fiscal and financial mechanism information, and then moving to developing approaches for different alternatives for the financing, and looking at how would we implement that, and then moving to implementation. So we believe that the cycles would be very, very similar, if not identical.
And I think also, there's a couple of questions about this in the chat, right? So the different cycles will be applied to the different parts of the system, and they're going to be grouped according to many different factors, right? And so some of those factors include maybe, if parts of the system are billable or have billable services or non-billable services, or, the kinds of financial structures and processes that are similar between the different parts of our system, that information will be used to then group the different parts of our system into various cycles. So this is something that we're still having discussions with Horizons about, but that's really the sort of rationale as to sort of the different parts of the system being included in different cycles based on kind of a lot of factors, but a lot of them are really about the financing of those services that are provided. Another question, Debbie, is about the survey that goes out to providers. Who in the organizations will the surveys go out to?
I'm sorry, what was the question again? It's about who will get the survey?
Within the organizations, which sort of positions or individuals will receive those surveys.
So we use what's in PDS. So it'd be really important to make sure PDS is updated, but we would seek to send it out to the fiscal folks, but also executive directors that are listed, and I mean, if there's any other suggestions that you want to make, feel free to make them. But we believe that a lot of it will be financial in nature, and that we probably need your actual accountants to receive the survey.
But I think this is another plug to please make sure that whoever's in the PDS, that the contact information is correct, because that's the only information we have, right, to be able to send out these surveys to you all. So if there have been changes, it'd be great to get those updated, so we have the right contact information.
Right. And I will say, I did see that someone had asked, is it one survey per provider? And yes, it should be. The survey is going to be designed that if you have multiple programs that might have different answers, it allows for that. So we expect one. It does ask for the provider's name, because it's more about collecting the financial data, and it's confidential from the standpoint that Third Horizon Strategies is collecting the data and aggregating the data, and this really is about just getting to understanding the system, what's important to all of you. And we did want to try to reduce the potential for a provider to respond numerous times, by accident or whatever, because it would skew the data. So yes, that is the intent, is to collect it, one per provider.
So there's another question about, will stakeholders include DOH, OMH, and plans? And I would just start off by saying, so that Third Horizons has been doing a lot of background, research, and part of that includes how other states and other agencies within our state what their funding models are. So, so definitely, and then a lot of expertise in terms of Medicaid managed care and thinking about how reimbursement also fits into the larger model. And so there definitely is information gathering from these other entities. I don't know, Debbie, if you have more to add there.
No, absolutely. As far as this, I just want to say, as far as the survey, it's collecting, the intent is to collect information from our funded providers, just to clarify that part. But in general, yes. And in fact, that's part of what was on the slide for the timeline, is saying that we want to engage with our other state agencies to make sure that we understand the funding mechanisms.
Great. Another question about, will the process have an effect on vulnerable populations? For example, those who are undocumented, uninsured, underinsured, or those who have problems accessing care. And the statement about those folks do seem to get the most benefit from the net deficit funding model.
Yeah, I mean, as you look at a review of net deficit financing, and what are some of the expenses that are being covered now and what isn't being covered now, those will be in those discussions, and looking for a better understanding of what are the potential inequities, and what needs to be funded and what isn't being funded now. Obviously, state aid is a finite bucket, so we're looking to maximize our funding. And obviously we as a state, as shown as an earlier slide, we are providing the most amount of funding, but we're looking to maximize that as best we can to address those needs. So those will be certainly discussed and looked at for sure.
Great. I see other comments. I hope people can hear me. I've been having technical difficulty all morning. So I apologize if my volume is low. Will for-profit operators have opportunities to apply for funding?
So right now, we do not provide funding to for-profits. It's a state, it's part of our statute. So, this is looking at taking the current way that we provide payments to providers, which is based on a net deficit financing methodology, and looking to change that methodology to hopefully address some of the obstacles of net deficit, right? Because there are benefits to net deficit, as we saw. And so this is looking at how providers are funded today and looking at improving that in a way that aligns with, financially aligns and supports our priorities and you all in being able to deliver the best, quality of services.
Another question, will there be a quote unquote held harmless provision so that no agency will be harmed for loss of funding?
So we can't tell you what it's going to be. I mean, we're at the beginning. We really cannot, and I think it would be a disservice to the consultant. The whole idea of bringing them on as, I'm drawing a blank on the word, as a entity that has no preconceived notions. We wanted to make sure that they came in open to generate any and all ideas on how to make this a better approach, a more improved funding approach.
Great. Does this mean there will be a 5-year delay in making progress towards changing or progressing in terms of integrated care? So I would just say that, we have been working on a regular basis with the Office of Mental Health to really think about all the ways where we can do a better job in terms of integrating care and addressing mental health and substance use disorders, along with physical health So I don't see this as being a delay. I mean, that work is ongoing and has been and will continue to be. And really thinking as we're moving forward about all the different ways where we can continue to better address people with co-occurring disorders. So this should not be an obstacle to that, that work is ongoing and will continue.
And Chinazo, I see there's a question in there too. I'm not clear on the differences between the phases of implementation. Are you saying that 3 cycles will apply to different parts of the treatment delivery system? And have you all decided, which parts of the system you will start with? So, and I know it's hard to visualize, but just going back to the chart of how much money we provide, at any given year, there's, $500 million of, state aid going, state funding, plus the block grant going out to the field. So this couldn't be a one-stop, take a look at it, come up with a Band-Aid of an approach. This has to be a very, comprehensive review. And so we have to kind of come up with a way to put it into blocks, or let's say cycles, where we're grouping some services together, based on some relationships. And then, working on that cycle until we get to implementation of a new approach, and then start another cycle with another group of services, at that beginning phase while we're implementing the first cycle of services. And no, we don't have it fully teased out of what, the group of services will be. We want to get this survey out and get some feedback going there. And then, make a determination. And we're trying to figure out where we can have the most maybe impact in the beginning, because we know this has been sort of long awaited. But we see it as a 5-year engagement because each cycle will take a certain amount of time, implementation, and addressing of any issues as we move along. And so we developed it to be a 5-year because we thought that would be the most thoughtful.
Great. So another question about what is involved, really, I see a few questions about what's really involved in terms of the financing, right? Is it just the net deficit funding? Is it all financing of all of the services? Is it the non-billable services? Is it the billable services? And so, so I think, the thing about working with the consultants is that they're going to be looking at all of this, right? And looking at how we currently fund non-billable services and billable services. And so this is not, we are not talking about changing Medicaid rates and reimbursement. We're not talking about that. But certainly that is going to be a big part of the pieces of the puzzle in terms of determining how the other funding, the state funding, should sort of complement the other, funding sources that we have. So it's really a very comprehensive approach, looking at all of the, reimbursement and funding sources that we have to think about how best the state dollars can be used. Debbie, you want to add to that?
No, you actually, that you covered that very well, Chinazo. That's exactly it. Exactly it.
So a question about we anticipate a different reporting mechanism other than CFR.
I would say that at the moment we do not anticipate that, but we don't know until we get through the process.
Great. So a few more questions just about the surveys and the really your voices. So a lot of questions about surveys, and just I want to reiterate what Debbie has said before. The surveys are one piece, but not the only piece, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for your voices to be heard. So there's going to be advisory committees, there's going to be town halls, there's going to be focus groups, there's going to be surveys. We have an email box that you can email us and, and really just provide all of your, comments and thoughts. And so the survey's the beginning, this is the beginning, but a lot of opportunity
to do some deep dives with, you know, others in various ways, one-on-one interviews, focus groups, advisory council, town halls, email, et cetera, et cetera. So, so there will, you know, and we think this is critical to have all this opportunity to hear voices and in a variety of ways. And so I just want to make that really clear. It's not just this one-time survey. Another question about the 5 years, why taking 5 years? So it's, so as Debbie had mentioned, there's going to be different cycles so that it's not, we can't do everything at once, right? We can't do all of it, you know, at one time. And so that's the reason why we're having these cycles. And so there will be changes made before the 5-year mark, but it'll take us 5 years to get through all of the different parts of the system. And so, you know, Debbie had mentioned as the cycle 1 is ending, that there could be changes and implemented while we're still working on cycle 2 or cycle 3. So it's going to be really happening over 5 years, but it's not that nothing's going to happen until the 5-year mark. So I just want to make that clear as well.
No, that's very true. And it's for several reasons, you know. One is just it's a large undertaking, and we want to be thoughtful and comprehensive, you know. The other reason is we don't want to overwhelm the system, you know, and also if there needs to be changes to the reporting system, you know, that requires some IT changes and they will take time as well. So we, you know, built in a lot of time cushion into this with anticipation that there will be things that we don't know and and we'll need to address. And so that is open to learning from all of you in all of these engagements that will be continued throughout each cycle.
Debbie, what about the board of directors? Are they, how are they? I'm not, so the question just says, what about the board of directors? But I think it's about how maybe their voices may be included in this or part of this, or
yeah, I mean, I don't know, because we were definitely thinking about from the survey perspective of getting information on, you know, fiscally who's reporting in the CFR and just getting a little further breakdown and feedback on, you know, how the financing affects the financials for the provider. That's a really interesting question. We can take that back and think about that. That's a very interesting question, and thank you for raising it.
Great. A question about what will the connection be between the financial performance and clinical performance or outcomes? So let me just say that's a really great question, and we don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think this is also part of the process and part of the questions that we're going to have in our discussions with you. Certainly, that's very much on our mind about, right, how should the financial model support the kind of outcomes that we want? That's a really big question. And what should that look like? And so we don't have the answer to that now. I think that's again, this is part of the process to get at this exact question. So I think we'll see, you know, as this process unfolds. So, but that's a really good question and one that we have as well. There's another question, Debbie, about undocumented individuals, and I know others have had this question too, and you know, vulnerable populations and what will happen with the change in our funding model. And so, you know, will the provider be mandated to accept people who are undocumented or, you know, uninsured or underinsured? And I think, you know, again, the role for our goal here is to take care of New Yorkers and to take care of those who are, you know, most marginalized, right? I mean, that is the role of government. So I think this is certainly also part of the question, part of the issue that we're going to have to think through on how we're going to be able to best do this and make sure that services are available for all New Yorkers, particularly those who are most marginalized. So, you know, this will be part of the process, again, figuring this out, what this will look like. But certainly this is also, you know, a really important part of what state dollars go towards and will continue to go towards. But how exactly that unfolds and what that'll look like, I think, yet to be determined, and that is part of the process to get to this answer. Anything else to add, Debbie?
No, that is it exactly. I mean, we're looking at how our piece fits into the bigger puzzle, you know, across the, you know, the entire comprehensive way of the funding mechanism, from receiving state funds to any source of revenue. But we are also looking at what do state funds support, to your point, you know. So all of that will be, you know, reviewed and taken into consideration.
Great. So the next question is, when we say more equitable, there's a question about, will licensed programs that don't get funding, will they be considered in the future?
So we don't know that answer. I mean, you know, I can't really speak to that as a, you know, we're not, the project isn't set up to have sort of individualized goals like that. It's more set up to make sure that we are able to review, you know, sort of each service by its entire finance, you know, how it's entirely financed, so that we don't miss something, and, you know, or that the, you know, the consultant doesn't miss something, and also see its interrelationship between other services. This is why grouping the services is helpful, and, you know, looking at, you know, how we can make state funding available that is more equitable within, you know, within a provider. You know, a provider right now could have, you know, a treatment program, you know, the same exact program on two sides of the same street, but one was started in 1980 and one was started in 2022, and they're getting different budgets for that. And so we're trying to address, you know, and make it, you know, make the budgets and the amount of funding more equitable from that standpoint, but also looking at the priorities and, you know, the outcomes that we all want to see. And we don't want to have program service disruption. So everything will be looked at. So we can't really say what the end result will be.
Thank you, Debbie. So I'm just going to apologize again. I know I've had technical difficulties today, and I think people are still having difficulty hearing. So I just, I want to apologize. Analogy. Debbie, when will the changes directly impact budgets? In fiscal year 24, 25, question marks? You know, people, when can we anticipate that these funding changes will happen?
So we're looking at this timeline here, and, you know, implementation, you know, could possibly start, you know, with, you know, in June of next year, if all things are moving along. But, you know, I can't predict, again, you know, when it'll affect budgets or how that process will, you know, play out. I don't know, Tara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, but with the fact that the providers will be participating in this process, they'll learn when we learn when it will actually change how the budgets are done.
Thank you.
A question about, how do we see the LGUs contributing and supporting OASAS in this process, if at all?
Well, I believe, and I'll call upon Tara on this one too, but I believe that they, you know, in probably several different ways, but, you know, that currently some of the LGUs actually are running programs and receiving funding directly for those programs. And then, as you know, some are contracting with you all as providers, and we're providing that funding through the state aid letter process. And so, again, you know, our review, this beginning with the consultant, you know, we don't know how it will change or affect that process. So, you know, we won't be able to say right now, but currently, definitely how the money is provided to each, you know, service and program will be reviewed. And so that does include the LGUs. Tara, do you have anything else to add there?
The LGUs are a stakeholder in this process because many of the LGUs support our programs with a local share. So the LGUs would be included in all of the conversations, I would expect. And that is a point that we'll discuss with the consultant.
So there's a question about, instead of deficit funding, why not simply elevate the APG rates, which would benefit all providers? So let me just say, so not all of our services are billable. So that's really an important point. And this you know, new model is really takes into account our entire system. So prevention, recovery, harm reduction, and treatment. And you know, I think we certainly recognize the role of, you know, pushing Medicaid rates. This is something that we have advocated for, and you know, I'm proud that we've been able to increase the rates by about 5% across the board. But you know, there's more to our system than just the reimbursement rates, and so this is really needed to take a very comprehensive approach to our entire system. Debbie, any comments about that?
No, that is exactly it.
Great. So another question about how Third Horizon's getting input from providers who've been doing this work on the ground for decades. We hear you, and again, there are going to be many opportunities for this: focus groups, advisory committee, individual interviews, surveys. You know, there's an email box. We're town halls. So we're really trying to be very inclusive and have a variety of ways in which we can get input from all of you who have been doing this work for decades. And so I really appreciate that comment and question. And we're, you know, this is something that's very important for us as well, to make sure we have as many opportunities as possible. So I'm looking at the time, it's 11 o'clock. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to. We are going to be putting out a sort of a frequently asked questions and answers, and we'll have that document constantly changed based on the questions that come through. And so we'll post that and make that public so that we can, you know, answer all the questions that you all have put into the chat. So I want to thank you again for all of you for participating, for all of your questions. We really, you know, look forward to working with you. We want to hear your thoughts. This is, this is a, you know, a long-term comprehensive process, and we just really look forward to making this transparent and hearing from you. Debbie?
Yeah, and I just want to say we get a transcript of this presentation that includes all the questions in the chat. So we will provide answers to the questions that, you know, we weren't, if we missed them or whatever, we will see them because they're typed. And so, you know, we will definitely, and there will be, believe me, a lot more opportunities for discussions like these, as well as, you know, break off sessions. And, you know, there's a lot of work to be done. You know, this is the beginning, and, you know, we're just really excited to, you know, start it off, kick it off, make it transparent, and continue to engage you who, yes, we agree you are the experts. And so we want to hear from you.
Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.